All right, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? How is it going? I'm Is There No One Else? And today's video, we are going to talk about the dungeon group finder, queuing up for random normals, random veteran daily dungeons, PvE stuff. For those of you guys that are subscribers to the channel, you know that about 90, 95, 98% of my content's PvP related. This will not be. So if you're not interested in this, yeah, we're going to talk about the group finder. We're going to talk about quote unquote fake tanks, my thoughts on this, because it's been a conversation on the forums for well over a year now. Whenever I see it, I've seen some of the conversations on different channels. Deltia had a poll post on his channel where he was asking about fake tanks and or people queuing up with the wrong roles in for dungeons and what people thought about it. And yeah, I wanted to provide my perspective because I feel like I feel like I'm going to provide some nuance to this because I don't think it's an easy answer. So that's what this video is. We'll try and make it fun and as informative as possible. Let's dive into it. So the footage in the background, I am doing a normal dungeon, and this is going to apply to this video. I queued up for a random normal because I needed spell wall. I needed to get sword and board leveled. And so doing a random dungeon once a day gives you a lot of experience. So I figured slap on a quick scroll that I got for free and then go in here and get some experience. So I queued up as a tank. I got pierce armor on. But yeah, let's talk about my PvE accolades. That's not what they are. I've PvE'd a lot over the years, guys. I've been playing since Xbox first came out. As you guys know, I play a lot of PvP, just about every class in the game. In order to play every class in the game, I need to collect a lot of gear sets. In order to collect a lot of gear sets, I do a lot of PvE. And what I found when I was first starting out, that the best way to get in and get all the gear that you want is to actually become a good tank. There's just not as many tanks as there are damage dealers. And if you're good at it, you will be in on all the runs. Like everybody will, like if you know how to tank, that's how I got most of my gear for like, VDSA and other trial content and whatnot. I had to stop doing a bunch of the harder tanking stuff in the last couple of years because I had kids and apparently real life kids take precedence over a video game. I know that's crazy. But yeah, those are the poor choices that I made. I'm just kidding. It was a great choice. But yeah, I don't PvE as much as I used to, but I still do it for gear and whatnot and experience. But yeah, over the years, dungeons have gotten a lot easier, and that's for a multitude of reasons. I've gotten to experience this from my gameplay. I basically been playing nonstop on this game for the last 5 or 6 years, and they've gotten easier for a couple of reasons. Number one, our champion points. We've all gained a ton of champion points, and with the increase to champion points, our characters have gotten stronger. Number two, just the overall increase in mechanic and functionality of the game, like increased base healing, block mitigation, all these other sorts of things on different classes have made things easier. Buffs to different classes' abilities, different sets. There's different gear sets now that are best in slot tank, DPS, and healing sets that weren't best in slot, 2, 3, 4 years ago. And for that reason, stuff is a lot easier now. When I first started playing this game, around 30k DPS was like big boy DPS. That was like the goal. If you could hit 30k, that was the dream, I guess. And if you were like anything over 33 to 35k, like you were top 2% PvE DPS. Now people can friggin' light attack their way to 30k DPS. That's just the difference in the game. And a lot of dungeons are spec'd for those old mechanics. And so people are taking a lot less damage. They're dealing more damage. And mechanically, ZeniMax has made some of the dungeons easier. Now, there was a stat that came out a couple years ago. I forget what it was, but it was something along the lines of like, this is all getting to a point, guys, I promise. But there was a stat that came out that ZeniMax did. It was something like 50% of the ESO population or more, veteran people with champion rank points like endgame PvEers, cannot complete like White Gold Tower or City of Ash 2. It's something like that. Like a big chunk of the veteran community cannot complete these dungeons. And so ZeniMax tracks these things, completes, incompletes, and they run some numbers, and they want to have like a bell curve of the amount of people that can complete certain content. And so they've made some dungeons easier for that reason. And so when you're looking at these dungeons, and when we're talking about like White Gold and City of Ash, in my opinion, Veteran, White Gold, and City of Ash are pretty average dungeons. Like there's a good chunk of dungeons that are quite a bit harder, and there's a good chunk of dungeons that are quite a bit easier. It's though, in my opinion, those two are somewhere in the middle of the overall strength of like dungeon strength right now. And so when you have a pool of people where half thinks this is easy and the other half thinks this is hard, you have this big disparity, right? Like, think about like the average dungeon queue. When you queue up for a random a random vet, half the people are going to be like on average, half the people are going to be above average, half the people are probably going to be below average. And so you're going to get mixed reviews on groups sometimes. Sometimes you get in a group where you just run across that group of 3-man trial DPS and they just wanted to carry a fourth, and you fly through everything and they just melt stuff and you're like, oh my gosh, these guys are ridiculous, right? And then other times you get in a group where it's a bunch of level 48s, 49s, the first time to the game. They're trying out new characters. They're new. It's their first time in the dungeon, and you're going to struggle. You're going to have a hard time because they don't have max level characters. They don't have max level gear. They're not experienced in the game. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're all different players. It's just experience changes from dungeon to dungeon. And so those mechanics exist during random dungeons. Now, another thing that exists, we will tie this all together, I promise. Another thing that exists in PvP or in ESO PvE is that's different from most MMOs is the tank role is a little bit different in ESO, where survival, once you can survive, a lot of people run buff sets. You know, if you look at endgame tank gear back when I used to tank, like back in my day, Alkosh and Torg's Pact were the shit. Like you debuffed the enemy's armor so that your damage dealers could do more damage and, you know, finish content faster. But the main goal of a tank is to draw aggro and stay alive, right? Once you can do that, if you can do more, you should do more. Whether it's healing, Earthgore was popular for tanks for a while because like it was a free save on a damage dealer. And so a lot of tanks were running Earthgore when Earthgore was super powerful. Like I said, Alkosh, Torg's Pact, those were popular for DPS. It doesn't matter how you buff the group. Like as long as you're doing your job of staying alive and drawing aggro, you can be at DPS. And so what we have is we have a big slew of dungeons where you don't need a tank and full-on tank gear. You don't. Like I want to say 70 to 80% of dungeons I could probably tank on a damage dealer, like a full-on spec damage dealer with just taunt. I can tank most of them. And so when you have this sort of thing where tanks just aren't as important, a lot of people queue in as damage dealers into random dungeons and they take the chances. Like, hey, you know, 50, 60, 70% of these dungeons don't need an actual tank. I'm going to queue in as a tank and I'm going to play my chances. Plus, I might be queued in with a group that's not very good. They're inexperienced. And so instead of the dungeon not being able to be completed, I'm going to have some DPS to help the group done and get and complete the dungeon. And so you see a lot of people do this because A, it just makes sense to maximize your role as much as possible. If you can do more, you should do more. And number two, you get a mixed bag of people in these dungeon things. And so how is this all tied together? Well, you have people that get really upset about fake tanks in PvE, about people queuing in as tanks and they're not actually tanks and they ruin it and they're damage dealing and they're going to basically running through everything. And yeah, like you get both sides. Like you get people upset about quote unquote elitists, and then you get other people upset that like people just can't do the content and they're in there like they're unable to do the content and they don't realize that they're unable to do the content, but they still want to have an opinion about what you're doing, which happens quite a bit. And so These sorts of things happen a lot in random dungeons. And I know this because I just, 2 years ago, I started leveling up a PC account. I still hop on there to do dungeons, to get gear and whatnot. And I am a newer character on there, and I do the random dungeon grind. Now I could queue up with friends and stuff like that, but they've already done that. And I don't like to drag people along with it. I'll just do the random normals, and it's not a big deal to me. Most people are cool, but every once in a while you get a group where they get upset about things. And from my perspective, as long as the tank is drawing aggro, like if you queue in as a tank, you have to know that you might have some inexperienced players in there. And to help them out, if you queue in as a tank, throw a taunt on your bar. It's easy to throw the Undaunted skill. It doesn't have to mean you change your rotation. You can be a full-on DPS. Just literally throw a taunt on your bar so he's not dying all the time, because that's what you signed up to do. He signed up to do a dungeon. You signed up to be a tank. Just do your tank role. If you're the guy that queues up as a tank and is flying through killing everything, and you're not giving newer players a chance to even do their quest line and help participate in the dungeon, you're kind of being an asshole. Like, let's just be honest. You're being an asshole, and you probably should not do that. Like, it'd be a lot cooler if you weren't, So the whole days thing, if you like, yeah, never mind. If you're a newer player and you're trying to go through every friggin' satchel and basket in the game, and you're trying to pick up every single thing, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should wait until all the bosses are dead and realize that, hey, you queued in a random normal or a random vet with 4 other people, and not only is it on your time, it's on their time also. If everybody agrees to do it, cool. But I mean, you don't have to pick up the satchels right away. You can go through, kill the boss, just ask somebody to stay in the group, and then you can walk back after everything's dead and pick up stuff once the boss run is completed. Then people that need to get out and go on with their day can do that. And so it's a give and take. Like this dungeon specifically, and the reason why I posted it is we have one person in here that's level 47. He's trying to just get to champion ranks. We have 2 people looking for spell power cure. I'm looking to level spell wall. We're all in here for different reasons. None of us have superiority in this situation. We're all just trying to complete a dungeon to get what we need. And so let's just help each other out and get the thing accomplished and move along our way. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. The other thing specifically with the group finder is, like I said, tanking at one point in this game used to be a lot of fun. Like I had a lot of fun tanking. I enjoyed doing it. It's not that way anymore. They've just things have gotten so much easier that for me, in order for me to enjoy tanking, I'd have to do end game trial content. And I don't have the time to spend working with a raid team to do that anymore. I just don't. And so I don't get the enjoyment out of tanking like I used to, because all the content that I can actually participate without spending a lot of time grinding with a group on specific nights, I can't do. And so there's nothing wrong with that. Like ZeniMax wanted to open up dungeons and content to more players, and that's fine. But what happened in turn is it's kind of eliminated the tank role. I know Nephis did a video like a year ago talking about where have all the tanks gone, and that's the case. Like the tank role isn't really a thing anymore. It's not really something you need in most content in this game. And so I feel like a lot of people from other MMOs, they come in here expecting people to have a tank role and 2 DPS and a healer, expecting this trinity that other MMOs have, and that's not the case. Now, if people want to argue that should be the case, that there should be more tank roles, healers should have more of a spec, and there shouldn't be 3 DDs with pale order basically carrying out an entire person's role, I can get behind that. I can agree with that would be more fun, and bringing those roles back would be an enjoyable aspect to doing content again. The problem I have is I don't know how to do that. Like, how do you make content easy enough so that other people can complete it, while at the same time having harder content for people that want to do harder content? Like, I'm not sure. Like, do you just do more hard modes? Is that what you do? And you increase block damage, like make it harder on tanks? I don't know. I really don't know what to do in that situation. But yeah, I think you can make that case. I think you can make the case that tanking should be more of a thing, but the reason it's not now is like it's just not needed. And so if you're queuing in for a normal dungeon, like you don't really need a tank at all. If you're queuing in for most vet dungeons, you also don't need a tank. And so do you really expect somebody to want to like come into a dungeon on a full-on tank spec, bored out of their mind, just ransacking and pierce armoring and standing there? No, people want to have fun in this game. And so all this complaint about fake tank stuff, like a lot of it just doesn't make much sense to me. It really doesn't, because it's like, if you're upset about fake tanks, why don't you queue as a tank? Like, why don't you go sit there and hold block against stuff that doesn't do anything? It's boring right now. And so a lot of people just fulfill the role, and they do DPS or they heal or whatever, and you know, they get people that get upset at them for what they're doing. And it's just it's more of a product of the game and the current state of dungeons, in my opinion, than it is the fault of those players. But like I said, there is some middle ground there. If you're queuing as a tank and you're not doing the tank role, kind of a dick. Like you're kind of a dick. If you're running ahead and just being selfish, you're also kind of a dick. Like that, there are people like that are in the game that do stuff like that. And it's like, dude, if you wanted to run ahead and kill everything, you could have just gone solo. Like you could have just gone solo. You don't have to do that with a group of people, but you know, it is what it is. When I queue as a healer, if I'm on a magic spec, I make sure I have a resto staff. I don't always equip it, but if we wipe in a group, I'll put a resto staff on the back bar and I'll throw a rapid regen on, because most content, you don't need more than rapid regen for dungeons. And so I will do those things because that's the role that I signed up for. Now, I can get behind the argument that people that sign up for roles that don't fulfill them, like in any way, like probably shouldn't be there. But at the same time, it's like there's some stuff that just doesn't need it. Like, yeah. I'm not going to go into too many. I'm not going to go into too many dungeon stories. We all have our stories of different weird things, but yeah, like there's just a wide diversity of people queuing up for stuff, and yeah, like you have your choices. Like you can queue in as a pure DPS, and you can go queue in as a DPS spec in the dungeon finder, and you could sit there for 2 hours and not get a dungeon. Or you can queue in as a tank, knowing you can tank the content and DPS the content and get the stuff done and get the experience you want and the gear you want, while also still fulfilling the tank role, because that's the way the current meta is set up. And all that you get in consequence is, you know, somebody maybe getting a little mad at you because, you know, you're taking away their chances to parse on bosses and whatnot. So, the pros outweigh the cons there in my opinion. So yeah, it's not the best situation. I know. And that's why I want to talk about this. It's in my opinion, it's nuanced. I think we have a nuanced situation here when it comes to dungeons, and I think it needs to be talked about. Like, I don't think this is one of those things that's getting talked about enough to where it would, like, something will probably be done about it, and that's why I'm talking about it. I want to get the thoughts out there and kind of explain all points of view, because I don't think it would be a good thing to just eliminate these mixed builds from doing content, because I don't think that's the way you should go about doing it. You should make the content harder, more reliant on having a tank, and then more tanks will be in there. If you just eliminate people doing these hybrid roles, what's going to happen is people will queue for the dungeon finder, and they'll just queue and never get into a dungeon. They'll never get into a dungeon because there just won't be enough people for it. Tanks don't want to bore the hell out of their minds sitting through this stuff, and DPS are going to have to sit there and wait for the 2 or 3 tanks to be in there. And so maybe you get lucky, maybe you don't. I've sat in the dungeon finder for hours as a DD. For hours waiting for a dungeon, because healers and tanks specifically are so rare. So yeah, I'm going to end this video here. Hopefully this has explained some things to you guys, or from my point of view and what I've seen and everything. And hopefully it kind of talks about both sides a little bit, and wanted to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching, guys. Have a nice day.